and welcome to our first chapter, which really deals primarily with macroeconomics. So if you got a little confused, chapters 1 through 3, because I start everybody at the same spot, hopefully now you will see that we're going to break off and just start looking solely at macroeconomics. So what we're doing, again, is just kind of venturing off, and we're going to start studying those things that apply to the overall economy. The first thing we're going to look at is the gross domestic product. Then in the next chapter, we'll look at the consumer price index. Eventually, we'll look at things like unemployment, the stock market. We'll look at savings versus investing. So we're really going to get into the meat of macroeconomics. So the first thing we want to do is to talk a little bit about our first objective, which is what is the economy's income and expenditure. What this has to do with is when we talk about economic growth, we can measure it one of two ways. We can measure it according to the income approach, which is where we would add up things like rent, wages, profit. We would add those things together. Or we can do it from the other side, which is the expenditure approach. And that's actually a much easier way to measure gross domestic product. I'm going to show you in some upcoming objectives some of the differences in the two ways of measuring. But the most important thing to remember right now is it doesn't matter if you use the income approach or the expenditure approach, because guess what? They're always going to be equal. It doesn't matter. So if a person comes up with the GDP as an expenditure, person comes up with GDP as an income, they're always going to be equal. And so let's take a look at why that is. Oh, well, first we're going to have a challenge problem. So Nala pays James $50 to mow her lawn. So I want you to think about this in terms of the circular flow diagram that you studied back in chapter 2, I believe. So if we think about the expenditure approach and we think about the income approach, remember they're equal, it doesn't matter. Here, if Nala pays James, we would say, well, what is that? That's wages. I've got to find my pen here. So we're dealing with wages, which is actually an income approach way to measure things. And what do we pay wages for? We pay it for the factor of production of labor, which is the expenditure approach. Okay. Now, if Nala's paying James $50, so James is receiving wages. So here's James, and he's receiving wages of $50. And Nala is paying the $50. You can see that if I measure it this way, it's going to be the expenditure approach, it's going to be $50. If I measure it the income approach, it's going to be $50. So what should you get out of this? Income and expenditure should always be equal. It doesn't matter which one that you use. So let me see. So if I erase my doodles, you can see that the expenditure approach rises by 50 and the income approach rises by 50. They're always going to be equal. So that's what I want you to remember for this little topic of our conversation. And again, why are they equal? They're equal because when we talk about land, labor, and capital, that there is always that corresponding rent, wages, and profit, okay? So they're going to be equal because the circular flow diagram, depending on how we want to cut it, and I'm just going to show you the diagram again so you can kind of remember. If we look at the diagram and we kind of split it, let me see what would be the best way to split it, probably this way. That this side, whatever GDP equals over here, must also be what GDP equals over here. This would be the income approach, measuring wages, rent, and profit. And the expenditure approach is going to measure it based upon those goods and services which are purchased. So we're going to look at the gross domestic product, which is the final market value of all goods and services produced in an economy in a given year or time period, usually quarterly, but you'll look at it in years wise. So they must be equal. Okay, so that's kind of what you should get from that. So let me erase that. And there are lots of things that the gross domestic product does not talk about. So remember our diagram that we did in chapter 2 is just one facet of the economy. This, oh, you're not going to let me go backwards. Oh, that's dandy. Okay, we're going to talk about the government in this circular flow diagram. We're going to add that in. So right now you have a very bare bones skeleton when you talk about the economy. You just have expenditures, or you just have the income approach. But what we're going to do throughout this course is add in each element of the government, the financial system, and eventually we're going to look at the foreign sector, meaning how we interact with the rest of the world. So until next time, I look forward to seeing you back here. And if you have any questions, please don't hesitate to contact me. Thank you for your time, attention, and have a great day.